Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cyber Pro podcast. Industry leaders share their insights, and we're super excited to have Dr. Bill Anderson on today. So, Dr. Anderson, give us some insight about who you are, what do you do, and why you and the company you work for, Mattermost, is so awesome.
Uh, so, you can call me Bill. Yes, I'm actually a cryptographer, trained, got a Ph.D. in cryptography, and I've worked in the security industry my whole career. So I've generally done product management, and I'm principal product manager for Mattermost. We are a secure collaboration platform for critical infrastructure. So what that means is folks like the Air Force's Air Mobility Command runs their flight operations off of the Mattermost platform, which is very cool if you think about it. So these folks are physically distributed. You have decision makers trying to decide what's the weather going to be like when I move cargo from point A to point B. What's the cargo? What permissions do I need to get it over this particular country? Are there diplomatic questions? What's the maintenance status? Where's the air crew? How long's the flight? How much fuel do we need? There's tons of information that goes into making a decision that they make, probably 20 times a day, and they got flights all the time. They needed a place to come together and have all these different sources of information, which are dynamic, available to folks, and then moving through the course of a flight operation. And things may change. Of course, things may go wrong. The weather changes, and they have to land this flight somewhere that it wasn't intended. Tons of people have to weigh in, sign permissions, give orders, make changes. It's dynamic. How do you do that with a system that's scalable, that's secure, that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, that isn't custom? So the core of the technology is open source. Plus, then we've got a bunch of enterprise capabilities built on top of that. How do you do that in an affordable way? So we do that day in, day out for Air Mobility Command, for large banks, for enterprises, for other sort of DoD applications, for manufacturers, for aero defense companies, and it's really all about like just putting people and letting those people work with each other to solve problems that involve a lot of information. So the way I got involved with the company is I'm a security guy, and security is incredibly important. I'm a product guy, and I spent a lot of my career sort of inventing stuff, and created my own startup, ran it for years. Got investment from In-Q-Tel, which is a venture capital arm of the CIA, in fact. Sold the company, ran a couple of other companies, and when I saw this Mattermost opportunity, which is about not quite a year ago, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. They're serving this sort of critical application need. They care about security. They're doing this amazing platform. It runs on mobile and desktop and browsers and you name it. And the team the people are just so smart. So it's been just a fantastic journey for me so far.
Bill, I'm excited to ask you this next question. I'm a PhD candidate in cybersecurity leadership, specific to cyber psychology, but you have a PhD in cryptography. So, what is cryptography, and what made you want to pursue this degree?
Yeah, I had a great professor in undergrad, Dr. Gord Agnew at University of Waterloo. My accent will give me away. I'm a Canadian American. I'm a dual citizen. Um, and Gord Agnew was this fantastic professor. He was one of these unique folks who really knew how to teach. A lot of profs are really smart, but you can't understand what the heck they're talking about. This guy could explain things. And it turned out he'd done a startup, which was a cryptography company that after I finished my PhD, I ended up going to work for, and it did elliptic curve cryptography. It was kind of the pioneer of commercializing elliptic curve crypto. It's a company called Certicom. We went public. We were very successful. We were kind of the basis of the mobile internet, because as soon as you went mobile, you needed security. And the incumbent technology, the RSA algorithm, at that time didn't run very well on small devices, mobile devices. Today, it's no problem because they've got a lot more computing power. But we were, and I was in the product space, right time, right place. What do we have that's uniquely required where we have advantages and there's a need? And that was how I got into the commercial side of it. But So cryptography has turned out to be just fascinating place because, as you know, it's really a cat and mouse, attack and defense. It's never ending. I've been doing this for years now, and there's going to be another 50 years of people like trying to solve these problems. They're never going to be completely solved. But what is it? What is it? Okay, that's the question. Cryptography goes back about 2,000 years when people were first writing down messages, sending them from point A to point B, and trying to make sure that the bad guys didn't read them in between. They used some methods that made sense at the time that were sort of the fundamental basis. The simplest example, which is attributed to Julius Caesar, called the Caesar cipher, is you took the letter A and you in the Roman alphabet, and you adjusted it, you shifted it forward so many characters, 3 or 5 characters forward. So you wrote E instead, or D. You did that with every letter in the alphabet, and then you just wrote down the plain text. And the adversaries would read it and say, I don't know what this says. It's gobbledygook. By the way, it turns out that one's really easy to crack if you know the key. And the key is the number of letters that you shifted forward. About 250 years ago, people started to make really good improvements on those algorithms. So they were still letter substitutions, but they had a little bit more structure to them and they could be more complex. And then about 80 years ago, we started to see the beginning of real modern systems. Systems like the German Enigma Cipher, which is it's a polyalphabetic substitution cipher that used a sort of electromechanic system to do it. Basically the same idea, but horrifically complex. You would type the letter A on a keyboard. A would be turned into another letter randomly. Let's say it came out as F, which then went to another rotor in the system, which changed F into another letter, not randomly, but in a predetermined way that was consistent with that one rotor. And you might have up to 5 or 6 rotors or 7 rotors in the system. So A, which you typed, would end up coming out the other end of the system as just a different letter, F, let's say. The next time you press the letter, it advanced the gearing so that A would not come out as F the next time. It would come out as some other letter. And every time you typed a letter, the gears would rotate and you'd get a different letter out. This turned out to be so hard that human beings could not break that system. And there's reasons for it. It's pretty complex, but it ended up being the sort of genesis of one of the first computers was used to try to decrypt Enigma ciphers, which sort of led to the modern computing revolution. It was actually developed in the UK and with American inputs as well to create a computer that could try to reverse based on some pattern weaknesses in the system. Okay, so then along came some other techniques. So we started to use computers to do our cryptography. What does that mean? I mean, we could do these sort of substitutions faster. We could use a little bit of mathematics. And it started off with what are called private key ciphers. For me to send you a message, you and I would both need to know the same key. So if it was a Caesar cipher, I need to tell you the key is the number 5. And we both know when you get a message from me, you reverse it 5 letters, you'll get you'll get what I sent. Except we started using longer and longer numbers and slightly different, more complex machines. In the 70s, some very smart mathematicians came up with a brand new invention called public key cryptography, which turned out to be the basis of the modern internet. With a public key cryptography, it's not the same key. We use a mathematical algorithm to create a key for encrypting something and a different related key for decrypting, but they're not the same. And you cannot determine the one from looking at the other. What this meant was that I could put my public key out in a directory somewhere and say, that is my key. If you want to send me a secret message, go grab that public key and use it to encrypt the message. And I'm the only person that has the private key. I'm the only person that will be able to do it. It turns out it works in reverse too. I can use my private key to do what's called a digital signature. I will take a message and it will create an artifact of signatures, just another blob of data using the private key. And anyone out there can go to the directory and look up my public key and run the mathematics, a certain type, to confirm that, that artifact, the signature, could only have been created by the person who has the private key. This is cryptography. And we built up everything based on sort of being able to send something securely to someone else, and then also for that person to sign something. And once you have those properties, you can do e-commerce. I can say, I would like to connect with Amazon.com servers to buy something, and here's my credit card. Amazon says, it's us, trust us, here's our public key. And there's a little more to it than that. And we do a key negotiation over a protocol called TLS, Transport Layer Security. It's in your browser. When you see the little lock turn on, it's because TLS is turned on. And it then says, okay, now Bill and Amazon can talk to each other and derive a symmetric key or private key that they're both going to use for bulk encryption of sending lots of data back and forth. And then we then use that mutually derived or exchanged private key to use a smarter, mostly smarter, a faster algorithm for sending tons of data, so gigabytes of data back and forth. When we're done with the transaction, we can both throw away that key and everything's hunky-dory. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's fundamentally what cryptography has looked like up until this decade. There's a problem, which we'll talk about probably later on, which is that those algorithms are based on mathematics, and mathematics has elegant and beautiful patterns that are based on sort of fundamental, we don't know. They're probably based on fundamental properties of the way our universe is constructed. So math works a certain way. And the reason we made these public key algorithms, RSA, elliptic curve, and Diffie-Hellman being the ones that you will have heard of, is because we could construct a problem that was easy to compute in one direction and almost impossible, let's say computationally impossible to compute in the other direction. Everything's wonderful, except quantum computers don't follow the same rules as our conventional computers. And quantum computers are going to be able to break some of those one-way algorithms and basically read all of our mail unless we make a significant change to the way we're doing cryptography. So that's coming next.
Bill, you gave us a great explanation of cryptography, and I want to actually dig into a specific reference point. So, what is the true meaning behind the Chinese claim that they've broken RSA encryption?
There were some Chinese researchers that published a somewhat exaggerated article, and certainly the press did no favors by taking the exaggerations and running with it. And what they said is, we've broken RSA. RSA is a public key algorithm. It was kind of one of the first, still good. By the way, still good. Don't run for the exits. And what they did is they said, look, we're going to use a quantum computer. So a quantum computer is different from the one that's sitting on your desktop or you're holding in your hand in your phone. It basically uses some weird properties of I guess you'd say of matter, where there are relationships. I'm going to get this a little bit wrong. I apologize to the real experts in the audience, but atoms actually can interfere and sort of communicate with each other in the low level sort of quantum media of reality. They influence each other. And so folks figured out how to isolate individual things, they call them qubits, that can talk to each other effectively in this special, like super cooled medium that is isolated from all external influences to run computations. It sounds like science fiction. It's not. But the trouble is that they're not very big yet. It's not possible physically, like our engineers have not figured out physically how to put a lot of these little qubits together and have them communicate with each other and not be affected by noise and have errors break into the system. So the state of the art in the industry right now is Google, about a month ago, announced that they have a 105 qubit computer. And these are general purpose qubits. So that we'll just talk about general purpose qubits. Other industry leaders are, running around 50 to let's say 50 to 100 qubits seems to be about the state of the art. You need more than that in order to break of the current size of the public key algorithms that we're using. What the Chinese researchers announced is that they had used a moderately sized quantum computer. I think it was about a 50 qubit computer to break about a 50 bit RSA composite. And what that means, a composite, so what RSA is based on is you take two large prime numbers. It's easy to pick prime numbers. You multiply them together and you get a composite. And that composite's the public thing. You tell people, hey, this is our composite. We're going to use this in this system. What is hard is figuring out what were the two prime numbers. This may not be obvious to the folks listening why that's hard, because they're thinking, if I give you the number 21, you're going to say 3 and 7. That's easy. That's 21. It's not so easy when you get up to sort of uncountably large numbers, which is the space that we actually work in. So for commercial RSA composites, they're 2048 bits. You need roughly 3 times more than that in qubits in order to run the algorithm that would let you factor the composite. So you'd need 5 to 10,000 qubits in a coherent working system that stays working long enough to run the algorithm. It's a thing called Shor's algorithm that's used for reversing this thing. And it works. But all the Chinese researchers did is they did it for a 50-bit prime composite, or a composite, which is 14 digits, which incidentally you can do with a conventional computer a lot easier. That's the takeaway. Is you could do it on a conventional computer easier than it was to do it on a quantum computer. And so what they really were showing was the theoretical confirmation that we can use a quantum computer to factor composites. We knew that anyway. So this was in no way a breakthrough, and in no way an indicator that we need, there's nothing's changed. We know that that's possible. But what the industry has to think about is the fact that those quantum computers are going to keep getting bigger. And at the point where they are 5,000 to 10,000 qubits, they're going to be able to start breaking our composites and reading our mail. So we have to start planning ahead. Now, this is, I talked early on about offense and defense and cat and mouse. We have to start planning ahead for when those quantum computers are that big. It's actually worse than that, because the adversaries are already planning ahead, and they are recording our sensitive and classified communications and storing them. They can't read them now, but they might have a quantum computer that's big enough in the next, and experts are on the fence, or experts are, let's say there's a range of opinions. The opinions range from about 10 years to 30 years before there'll be a quantum computer big enough. Okay, that seems like a while away. However, if you're a government and you're storing classified information, sometimes you need to store securely for 50 years. And so they are already worrying about the fact that stuff that they're supposed to protect for 50 years might be exposed 40 years too early in the worst case scenario. So it's a real present issue that foresightful planners are starting to think about.
Bill, talk to me about what recent evolutions that you've noticed in the cybersecurity landscape that you're excited about.
So AI, and maybe not for the reason you think. First of all, AI is really dumb. As you probably know, it's not thinking. But the way that people and corporate systems and government systems get hacked is often not by banging your head against the cryptography. It's by banging your head against the people. It's by tricking people into doing the wrong thing. And the way that a lot of these social engineering attacks work is that they sort of slip under a human's perceptual threshold. They just get you into a mental state to make you do the wrong thing. Well, AIs don't think like people. They pretend to, but they don't. And what they can do is they can parse a lot of semantic information and find patterns. So my hope is that those tools are going to be able to be a sort of a backup to human beings to say, this conversation you're in, this transaction, this phone call, this email, this whatever, it's triggering the clues that say this is probably a social engineering attack, and it's not your boss asking you to open up this spreadsheet and, send him an iTunes gift card, right? Um, so my hope is that those tools will start to sort of bolster education and technology, and help people to sort of just avoid our inherent weaknesses.
What are some common misconceptions about cyber that you encounter way more than you should?
Um, my pet peeve is often companies, security companies that do security through obscurity. It is just a fundamentally incorrect approach. So the idea is, I've created a new cryptography algorithm. It's the best thing ever. It's really great, but I'm just not going to tell you how it works. So use it, because nobody knows how it works, and it's great. Stupidest thing ever. Run for the exits. Right? If a vendor is telling you they've invented something new, ask them what the algorithm is, and ask them how many experts have actually studied it. The good stuff is open sourced. It's reviewed by academics for years. It's looked at from every possible angle. The security comes from knowledge, and there's lots of examples in the past of mistakes that have been made. It's natural. Like, I was involved in the IETF's working groups for the TLS protocol, and there's an incident, not an incident, but just a normal practice where I think it was TLS version 1.1 was published and people were using it. We'd all looked at it. I mean, and people better than I am at understanding protocol. Like, yep, that's good. Ship it, right? And one guy came in and said, I think that there's a man in the middle attack right there. And then everybody else looked at it and went like, oh, you're right. There is. There's a man in the middle attack right there. None of us noticed it. But because this was an open source process, we caught it early. That's why we now use TLS 1.2 and about to, shifting to 1.3, because you can make those mistakes. But by having a large group look at it, you're more likely to catch the issues.
Bill, what do you feel is a critical aspect of a robust cybersecurity strategy that can be used for most organizations?
Um, use standardized algorithms from reputable companies that, frankly, open source is the best way to go, right? You need to look at their source code if you can. You need to know that that source code is based on, having all the known vulnerabilities patched. You need to like go all the way up from the top of the application down to the bottom of the technology stack, and know that you're using stuff that gets updated all the time and that is open to as much public scrutiny as possible. So to me, that's the fundamental principle: is trust and allow yourself to be verified. Plan, uh, communicate, and then the other thing is to use layers. So one system's never enough. Um, if you can, and especially for anything critical, have multiple layers of security, because some system might be broken, but the next one down might catch it. The U.S. government and other governments do this in particular. So for the really sensitive stuff, they'll actually mandate the use of a redundant, let's say a VPN. They'll use 2 VPNs from different vendors. The idea being, if there was a vulnerability in one, unplanned or otherwise, it won't be the same vulnerability in the other one. And so you'll still be left with one secure working tunnel. So when it really matters, think about redundancy, think about visibility, transparency in the stack. And the third thing is, don't do it yourself. You will get it wrong. I guarantee it. There are experts and experts and experts. You need to ask the experts, what's the right way to architect this? What are the vulnerabilities? And also, the last thing I'll say on this is, understand your threat model and decide what you're willing to protect against and what you're willing to spend money to protect against. And be pragmatic. You cannot protect against a nation state level, large nation state level intelligence service going after you. They will get you. They will get your data. That's not your adversary. Your adversary is probably cybercrime, accidental disclosure, and insider threat, right? If those are your real threats, model them and protect against them. But you can't stop someone who, sneaks into the semiconductor design software firm and plants a backdoor, in the lithography equipment to write something into a piece of hardware that it turns out to be an undocumented hardware feature. You cannot prevent against that. So you don't worry about it. But do worry about the stuff that's likely going to bring your business down.
Bill, you are well versed and have given us tons of information on cryptography, quantum computing. I'd like for you to just tell us a little bit about what the new NIST post quantum cryptography standard is.
Sure. So open study academics and other security experts to design the new public key systems primarily. So the things I talked about earlier, based on principles that are not vulnerable to Shor's algorithm, this thing that will let you reverse the hard problems in the current public key crypto systems. The design criteria also includes preventing against a bunch of other known vulnerabilities or potential vulnerabilities in algorithms. So differential cryptanalysis and a few techniques that have been developed over the years. So the idea is to say, look, we know there's a new threat. It's that a quantum computer can do these sorts of problem solving. Let's create some new public key algorithms that aren't going to fall prey to those and that aren't going to fall prey to a bunch of other stuff we know about. They started with probably 20 or 30 proposals. They've narrowed them down to those that stand up to that public scrutiny and then that have good performance properties. So relatively quick to compute, relatively manageable key sizes. They are now finalizing, in fact, standardizing on a few that are recommended for use. So we're going to start shifting. In fact, Mattermost itself is already shifting over to support the post-quantum crypto systems for exactly those critical infrastructure customers that need to start worrying now about their 50-year secrets.
How do you promote quantum safety based upon this?
I think it's having conversations with you and folks like you is to just, first of all, make people aware what the problem is going to be. And also, don't worry about the hyped up news articles. Your secrets are still safe, but you have to start planning. There's new stuff coming. We are going to convert over to it. It will be a gradual process. Frankly, it'll probably consist of a hybrid approach where we keep using the old stuff while we also implement the new stuff. Why? Because sometimes, despite our best efforts, cryptographers get things wrong. So you want to make sure that just in case there's a weakness that we haven't thought of yet in the new stuff, we're still protected. And then convert over finally when we really have to.
What are the top actions that you would recommend to businesses and organizations to prepare for this kind of post quantum computing world we're coming into?
The quantum apocalypse. Think about your secrets. I guarantee you, within 10 to 30 years, there will be computers that can read all the secrets that you've got today. So think about which ones you have now that you need to last for longer than that. And then start having this conversation with senior management in the organization and with the board to understand the impact to the business. What is your liability? What's your responsibility to your customers? Or if you're in government, what's your responsibility to citizens and others that are responsible? So think about it, understand it. There's no reason to run screaming for the exits, but you have to start taking action. So start now, because it takes longer than you think to make a cryptography change.
Thank you for tuning into the Cyber Pro podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on new podcasts and all of our cool bonus content.